Ever get that feeling, when you're driving down a road and it's so bad, it feels like you're on another planet?
Haha.
So yeah, seriously, are we on the moon?
Right.
Well, that feeling got me thinking about this research paper I was reading. It's called Road Maintenance Funding in Nigeria, Navigating Fiscal Constraints Through Strategic Prioritization.
And it's fascinating.
Oh, interesting.
So we're going to take a deep dive today into Nigerian road maintenance and see what's going on, why those roads are so rough, and what can be done about it.
I think what's really interesting is that this research highlights a problem that so many countries have, trying to balance their budgets, those limited budgets, with this massive need for infrastructure upkeep. And they've got these really complex funding challenges, bureaucratic structures, political influences. It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so let's unpack that first one then, the funding conundrum.
This research doesn't sugarcoat it. It basically says Nigeria's roads are a mess and they need a serious overhaul.
Yeah.
But the money just isn't there. It's like trying to bake a cake with a teaspoon of flour.
That's a great analogy. It's not that they aren't putting any money towards road maintenance. Right. It's just that the scale of what they need to do is enormous. Right. Maintaining a network that massive takes a huge amount of resources. Yeah. And then you've got all these competing priorities. Defense, education, social welfare, the list goes on.
That sentence got to give, right?
Right, the budget only stretches so far.
So it's a classic case of too many needs and not enough resources.
Exactly.
But what I'm finding is that in Nigeria, it's even more complicated than that.
Oh, how so?
Because the way the funding system works seems to be working against them. It's like they're playing financial whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I see what you mean. The research talks about these structural inefficiencies and how they distribute the resources they do have.
Yeah.
So you've got these overlapping budgets and then the lines of responsibility between federal government, state governments, local governments.
Yeah.
It gets so blurry. And then you throw in political influence, it's a recipe for disaster.
Oh, so it's not just a lack of funds, then it's also
it's way more complicated than that.
Okay, so let's try to break this down then. Because imagining our listeners might be thinking, wait, what do you mean political influence? How does that even play into road maintenance?
So picture this, right? There's money allocated for a major federal highway, like a big one connecting different parts of the country. Oh, good. But then suddenly that money gets diverted to a much smaller road. What? In some random district because a politician wants to see a project in their own area get funded.
Wow.
It happens more than you'd think.
So hold on, just to be clear for everyone listening, when we say federal roads, what exactly are we talking about?
Think of federal roads as the main arteries of the country. Connecting different states and regions. They're essential for interstate commerce and just keeping the country connected.
Okay.
You've also got state and local roads that serve smaller areas within a region. Got it. Different purposes, different funding streams, ideally.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I have this system where money that is supposed to go to these massive, important federal roads that connect the whole country, might end up getting siphoned off for projects that, maybe aren't as crucial on a national scale.
Exactly. It's a huge problem.
It's no wonder those roads are in a constant state of disrepair then.
Right. And what makes it even more frustrating is you end up with this paradox.
Right.
You've got allocated funds that aren't going where they're supposed to.
Right.
So those critical federal roads end up underfunded.
Yeah.
While less important projects get prioritized.
That's crazy.
It's just inefficient.
So it's not just a lack of money, it's a lack of clear structure, accountability. And, as I was reading this research, it just seemed like there are even deeper issues going on, like legislative challenges.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the biggest things the research points out is that Nigeria doesn't have a clear national transport policy.
Like at all.
It's wild. Imagine trying to build a house without a blueprint.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Right.
This lack of a comprehensive plan makes it almost impossible to come up with a strategic approach to how they fund road maintenance.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle without the picture on the box.
Yeah, exactly.
You might figure it out eventually, but it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to be.
Exactly. Without that roadmap, those decisions about which roads to fix, how much to spend, where to allocate those resources, it all becomes reactive.
Okay.
Ad hoc, Yeah. Instead of being part of a well-defined strategy.
So what we're seeing here is like this perfect storm of challenges. You've got limited funding, a convoluted funding system, and then this lack of overall guidance from, legislation and policy. It's a pretty bleak picture, wouldn't you say?
Well, it might seem weak, but the research doesn't just focus on the problem.
Some of it's good.
They actually offer some potential solution. Would be like a little glimmer of hope for these roads.
I like hope.
Me too. And one of the most promising ideas is this concept of strategic prioritization.
Strategic prioritization.
Yeah, so it's basically moving away from these reactive decisions and getting more towards a data-driven, objective approach to this whole thing.
Okay, strategic prioritization. I'm going to need you to unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
How does that actually work when we're talking about, fixing roads and stuff?
So think of it this way. Imagine you have a toolbox, right, full of tools, but you don't have a lot of time. Okay. And you have limited resources, and you have this machine that's broken. Yeah. You're not just going to grab the first tool you see, right?
Hopefully not, no.
You're going to assess the problem, figure out what's going on, and then pick the right tool for the job. Right. That's kind of what strategic prioritization is all about.
So instead of just reacting to whichever road is the loudest, squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing.
Yeah, or the one that's most politically,
convenient.
Exactly.
We were talking about using a system to actually figure out okay, this road needs to be fixed first because of all these other factors.
Exactly. And the research specifically talks about this method called multi-criteria decision analysis, or they shorten it to MCDA.
MCDA.
Sounds complicated, but really it's just about creating a framework that helps decision makers look at a lot of different factors.
Okay, so break that down for me. What kind of factors are we talking about here?
So it's more than just, is there a pothole?
Right.
They look at traffic volume, is it a major highway? Is it a tiny rural road? Okay. Economic importance, is it connecting big industrial zones? Facilitating trade. How many people use this road? Do they use it every day? To go to work, to go to school, to go to the hospital?
So are we talking about a spreadsheet situation here where they're plugging in all this data and it's spitting out
pretty much, yeah,
a result of
it's a big complex spreadsheet, but it helps them see the bigger picture.
Okay, so give me an example of how this would work in real life.
Yeah.
If they were actually using this MCDA thing.
Okay, so let's say you have road A, right? It's a total mess, potholes everywhere. It connects a small town with not a lot of traffic to a regional market.
Okay.
Then you've got road B. It's also a mess, just as bad as road A. But this one serves a major industrial zone, tons of traffic every day.
Okay.
So the MCDA framework, it would look at the economic impact, the traffic volume, all those things, and it would probably say, okay, road B needs to be fixed first, because it's going to have a bigger impact on more people.
Right, because it's not just about that one little stretch of road. It's got the ripple effect. What's it connected to? Who is relying on it?
It's about moving away from gut feelings and politics and getting into the data.
Data-driven road repair.
I like it.
I'm trying it out. We'll see if it sticks. Okay, so all this sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
But being realistic here, isn't implementing something like this going to be a huge project? Are they going to have to collect all this data, train people? I mean, wouldn't it be more expensive than just sending a crew out to patch some potholes?
So it is an investment up front for sure, setting up an MCDA system, right? But it's about long-term efficiency, and making sure that the money they do have is being used in the best way possible.
So it's like buying a really good GPS system.
Yeah, good analogy.
It might cost a little bit more up front. But in the long run, you're saving yourself time, you're saving yourself gas, you're saving yourself a lot of frustration because you're taking the best route.
It's all about thinking ahead, playing the long game.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this strategic prioritization thing, this MCDA, it could really be a game changer for Nigeria.
I think it has the potential, but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so what are the other pieces? What else needs to happen?
Well, we have to talk about the funding again.
Back to the elephant in the room.
Right. They need more resources, plain and simple.
Okay, but hold on. Haven't we already established that just throwing more money at the problem isn't going to fix it?
You're right. It has to go hand in hand with fixing the system.
Okay.
The research talks about clearly defining who's responsible for what.
Okay, so who's taking care of which roads?
Exactly. Is it the feds? Is it the states? Is it the local governments? Get it all sorted out.
So less of that overlapping budget stuff.
Yeah, get rid of the confusion, less bureaucracy, and it makes sure that the money goes to the right place.
It was like organizing a messy closet, Yeah, everything has its place.
Exactly. No more wondering where things go. Remember we're talking about those non-federal roads sneaking into the federal budget? They need to put a stop to that.
Stronger controls.
Yeah, make sure those federal funds are only being used for federal roads.
Okay, stay in your lane, basically.
Exactly.
All right, what about, checking in on all this? Like, it seems like you could have the money, you could have the structure all figured out, but if you're not keeping track of how things are going, then how do you know if it's working?
That's such a good point. The research talks a lot about monitoring systems. You have to be able to track what's working, what's not, and make adjustments as you go.
So it's like a feedback loop.
Exactly. Data-driven all the way.
Okay, so we've got strategic prioritization, more funding, clear responsibilities, financial discipline, and then these monitoring systems to check in and make sure everything is on track. Sounds like a pretty good plan, right?
It's a good start, a solid foundation, but there's one more thing that's absolutely crucial. It all comes down to political will. Okay. And long-term vision.
So the leaders in Nigeria need to be on board with this.
Yeah, they need to see that investing in infrastructure, especially roads, it's not just an expense, it's an investment in the country's future.
It's about looking at the bigger picture, right? Exactly. Like, how are better roads going to help the economy?
Right, how will it connect communities?
Improve people's lives.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Better roads, it means lower transportation costs. It makes trade and commerce easier. Farmers and businesses have better access to markets. People can get to healthcare, education, all those important things.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, it impacts everything.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm kind of left thinking about, well, we've been talking about prioritization and using all this data to decide which roads to fix first. But what about the people who are actually using those roads every day? Well, I'd have to get clear. What are their priorities?
I bet they're thinking about things like safety.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Can I get my kids to school? Can I get to the doctor?
Can I get to work without my car falling apart?
Exactly. Sometimes it's the simple things.
So it's a good reminder that behind all these numbers and budgets, there are real people dealing with the consequences.
Absolutely. And their experiences, their needs, all that should be a part of this conversation about how to fix these roads.
All right, so to everyone listening, next time you hit a pothole, or you're stuck in traffic, take a second and think about why that's happening.
Right, it's more than just bad luck.
It's funding, it's infrastructure, it's politics, it's all these things coming together.
And it's not just a problem in Nigeria. It's something countries all over the world are dealing with. That's true. It's a global challenge. We need innovative solutions, long-term thinking, and a real commitment to making transportation better for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Of course, my pleasure.
And until next time, stay curious.